your startup? Because I'm really
Sure.
curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, so we were talking just in the green room, which is gray or green.
The green.
We're marbling on the way in. This particular area is very significant to me. I had a startup about half a block down at 439 King in a place called TechSpace, which was a collaborative entrepreneurial space. I think we're 2003 timeframe, so quite a while ago now. Online research company. A couple of buddies and I had an idea while we were at business school that this internet thing was probably going to take off. We wanted to figure out how we could involve consumers in with brands. So the idea was, if you ask people their opinion of what they thought about products, they might, that might resonate. They might like those products more. So my two buddies went into the basement for like 2 years after they graduated. They were virtually unemployable. I got a job that I couldn't turn down, Boston Consulting Group, so I went to do that. But stuck very close with them, and they came out of the basement about 2 years later and said, we really need some help. This is a business that's selling it now. So I joined them, the three of us to begin with. We grew that office to about 9 people, I guess. And they're now 85 plus people up at Young and Eglinton. A company's called Hot Specs. It's an online research company. They're doing really well. So this is a very important area. A lot of good things started for me just like on this block here in Toronto, I guess 13 years ago. Not to date myself, but holy crap.
Is one of your buddies Shane Skillen?
Yes, one of my buddies is Shane Skillen.
Small world, especially in startup land, that's for sure. So you've worked with some really big names. What makes you move from a Lava Life to a Google to a Twitter? Like, how does that happen? How does that happen? What makes that change?
So each of those moves are a little bit different in the context of my own career. I've been getting a lot of questions about the Google to Twitter move.
It's a reason.
Yeah, so that's the freshest for me. 9 weeks ago, I started here in Toronto for Twitter. A couple of really important reasons for me. One is, what I've come to realize in my own career is, I love to build, right? So the small business, I'm speaking to a room full of people who are probably in the same boat. It's just very exciting to be working in a smaller environment and grow that into something much larger. So at Google, I was the 34th employee in the Toronto office. So I joined them when we were very small. At a time when we had this massive toy chest of really cool products to sell, we were trying to figure out exactly how we were going to sort of launch this into the market. Google had been in Canada for a long time already, but mainly as a sales outpost, selling search and some of the basic stuff. But we had work to do. We had to land YouTube, we had to land Android, some pretty big projects. And that was amazing, right? So I had an amazing run at Google. I was there for 5 years. I loved every day. I made a great team and obviously really good products. But when I got the call to come to Twitter, the opportunity was twofold. One, first of all, an amazing team, right? So I was the 37th person through the door of Twitter in Toronto. So back to this sort of smaller, more intimate environment of really hard-charging people. So I knew when I was going through the interview process that there were some very strong folks in the office at the management level. What I didn't know was who was behind them. And so those other, 32 people that I hadn't met are exceptional people. And so that's just very exciting. It's a smaller, kind of more intimate team. The other thing is where Twitter is in its life. So at Google, there's lots of really cool things going on, and they're constantly starting up new stuff. But the core of the business is pretty well understood, right? Search is well known. YouTube's pretty well understood. The mobile platform is growing nicely. At Twitter, things are still malleable, right? There's lots of cool stuff going on. We're still trying to figure out where this business is going to go and where it's shaped. You see acquisitions like Periscope, which are like huge game changers that are changing the face of Twitter, like in a really important way. So to enter into a company at this stage of the game, where the foundations of the business are still being formed, is an extremely exciting place for me. It's this idea of building and shaping, a company that I think is, first of all, profoundly important to me. I love Twitter and what it represents and what it does, but also be part of this ride where we're going to do some incredible things over the course of the next while. And we have some, the term that I'm using is authorship, and the ability to actually create that future, which is really exciting for a company that is 10, right? So it's a really unique place. Twitter's 10 years old, 322 million global users. Canada's a particularly strong market, so this was a difficult decision from a personal perspective. I have a lot of friends over at Google, but man, I haven't looked back since I've started. It's been awesome.
So what are some of the things that you guys are coming up with? What are these projects and what are these things that are coming up at Twitter that we should be aware of?
Well, that's a really big question. There's a lot going on. I think some of the things that I can talk about just in the last little while When you look at live video and the way that people interact with Twitter in general, and you start to overlay some of the deals that we just announced, right? So the NFL streaming rights is a pretty big move for us. And that brings the use case for Twitter into a whole different light. I mean, I think the questions that I've been getting are, do you think people are actually going to watch a football game, on Twitter? The answer is yeah, we do think that. and usage behavior is already indicating that it's going to be a strong move for us. So I think when you look at broadcast, that's one thing, right? So the consumption of different types of content that are being consumed on the platform is really interesting. There's this whole other story too about what live broadcasting means. I mean, so Twitter's always been this live connection to culture, right? One of the things that I've always found particularly resonant is that news breaks on Twitter, right? So this is where you find stuff happening. You've got this massive community of people who are talking. It's unfortunate news, but Prince passed today, which is tragic. But I found out on Twitter, minutes after I guess it had been released. So there's this really active live aspect of what's happening on the platform. And now we're introducing things like Periscope, which is live broadcasting. We were Periscoping here today with minimal equipment and the ability to get a live broadcast video stream out to potentially hundreds of millions of people around the world. It's just very inspiring. And I don't think we know fully what the full complement of products that roll from that are, but we're very excited about how Twitter is evolving as a content consumption vehicle and always as a content distribution vehicle.
Absolutely. So what about Twitter for business? I mean, most of us are entrepreneurs, we have businesses. What kind of features are there for Twitter business? I think a lot of us do use it casually, or we'll set up an account for a business, but what are some of the other things that you should do with it?
Well, to me, there's probably less of a story immediately around features and functionality and products and stuff, and just much more the core usage. Twitter as a platform is probably the best research tool out there. And if you want to follow individuals, people that you are selling to or are just interested in learning more about, you're getting sort of straight from the horse's mouth their thoughts and their feelings, and it's not being filtered through the media or anything else. It's a direct connection to whoever it is that you're interested in. That, to me, is profoundly powerful. But also, I think now that we look at the way that companies and businesses are creating their presence on the platform, you also have a chance to learn a ton. What are the things that they're highlighting? What's the discourse that they're putting out there? That's how you'll probably sell to those folks in terms of strategy and angles and communication. So Twitter at its core is an amazing business platform for research and for communication in general.
So how would you differentiate Twitter from all the other platforms that are out there? I mean, there's so many different social media platforms, live microblogging, or whether it be video or chat or anything like that. What strengths does Twitter have, or what are the differentiators?
Sure. There's two that I pay a lot of attention to. You can imagine we get the question a lot, and it's something we spend a lot of time thinking about. The first is, Twitter's a public platform, right? So that, I think, is obvious to many of us who've been on the platform for a long time, but when you compare that to some of the other platforms that are out there, there's no friending process. Right? You follow someone, and you're able to immediately access their thoughts, right? Well, no, you can do it that way if you want to. At the same time, there's a publishing dynamic to the way that people communicate on Twitter in this public way. It's profoundly different from a personal conversation. So, be it the classic sort of social use cases, I'm talking to my friends and I'm talking to my family. What I'll tell you is a pretty hardcore Facebook user for the past 8 years. What I've learned as I've evolved in my Twitter usage is that the people that I'm following on Twitter are way more interesting than my friends and family. No offense to any of my friends and family, but I learn a lot more, right? So that's one aspect of a public network. It's predominantly interest-based, right? So people are following topics, and they're following people and thought leaders that the nature of the interaction is much different. They're in a different headspace for the most part. The second part of that, so that sort of public versus private. And then there's this sort of headspace that you're in. Emotional versus sort of thought or intellectual. And we find for the most part that a lot of what happens on Twitter is actually more on that thinking side of things versus feeling. So if I was to compare the Twitter experience, like the average Twitter experience, the way that most people are consuming, to say Instagram, which is much more emotionally driven, right? It's pictures of my friends and pictures of my food and pictures of things that I'm doing that are interesting to me. That's a different conversation than the more cerebral, like here's an article that I find really interesting, here's an opinion that I have about a topic. Those are that's the nature of the discourse on Twider, and that differs from a lot of the other platforms.
And what would you say about Twitter use in Canada versus the US? I mean, it was obviously Twitter was born in the US and now it's everywhere all over the world. What are some differences in the way maybe Canadians use Twitter versus Americans? What are some things you're seeing?
So one of the most profound, there are a few, right? So Canada by definition is a social market. We always kind of punch over our weight in the context of usage and time spent and all that stuff. But as we look at the data on Twitter in Canada in particular, compare that to some of the other big growing regions of the world, one of the things that we see is video consumption in Canada is like off the dial. So compared to the US, the average Canadian will consume 5 hours a month of video more than the US will. I think it's because of the cold winters, for the most part. But there's something here in this market, and we had a chance to work with a lot of different publishers with a bunch of different companies over the last 15 years or so. Video in Canada online is a very special dynamic. We are a very unique market in the context of both how users are consuming video and what they're consuming, but also the business market around that video is profoundly valuable. We have an advertising market for a company that's predominantly advertising based that just can't get enough video, basically. And as we see these usage patterns changing, we're in a really great spot as it relates to both offering a great user experience with where the product is headed with things like Periscope and the different content that's available, but also an ability to service an ad market that is really in need of more high quality, viewable, non-fraudulent video.
Non-fraudulent is key, yeah.
Right.
Non-fraudulent is key. We're all for non-fraudulent. So what are some of the challenges you're facing? I mean, you just got in nine weeks ago. Maybe not you personally, but what are
Sleep
some of the... Sleep is a problem. Okay, fair enough. Learning everyone's names. That's a problem. But Twitter in Canada in general, what are some of the challenges?
I can't say that I'm faced with a whole lot of challenges yet. I think my team is shielding me from a lot of this stuff right now. Listen, I think from a strategic perspective, if I'm just to be honest, with a room full of entrepreneurs, we've got very strong competition in the market, right? So you mentioned there's different platforms socially that are out there, and they do well, right? What's good is the market is big, right? So we can all play nicely here, but we have lots of work to do in better articulating the value proposition of Twitter that I just explained to the wider Canadian audience. So one of the things that I often cite is that I started 9 weeks ago, the same day that Twitter's first CMO started. Right? So we are in the process now of building a sort of marketing organization that is much different than the Twitter that we've seen before. I'm very bullish on what's coming in that regard. But part of that exercise, for example, is landing our first consumer marketing head into Canada. So we've never had this function here before, where we actually get to grow the market from the market, which is a novel concept, I know, but we're really excited because there's a lot of insights that we need in the Canadian market that a local person, local town will be able to take care of for us. So our user growth in Canada is actually not a problem. We've been growing healthily, kind of up and to the right for a while. But accelerating that growth and telling the story of Twitter to different markets, different users, for different use cases is a big one for us. I think that sort of dovetails into the bigger challenge, which is Twitter by its nature is very broad. Right? So to start to talk about what Twitter means to you versus what it means to me versus what it might mean to you is a chore. Right? There's a strategic challenge there that we have to get right.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, you don't have a brand problem. People know who you are, but it's just about how do you work for me, or how can I use you, or how can I leverage that? Yeah. We're all starting up here. What would be some things you would say to a startup who wanted to get started on Twitter?
The first is just get on it. There's a lot of opportunity, and the potential audience is gigantic. And so, like any platform, there are best practices, and most of them are public. Learn them, know them, use them. Twitter is a conversation, right? So the idea of a Twitter campaign that sort of starts and ends is kind of a defunct idea. What you want to think about as an entrepreneur, as a smaller business, is the opportunity to reach out and connect to your users and your potential customers and basically every other constituency that you have. But that you write this story as a play in an infinite number of parts. Right? So who you are as a business, how you're going to engage, how you want to react is extremely important. I think the other thing too is, as daunting as it may sound, pay attention. Right? When people talk to your business on Twitter, they expect an answer. And there's an investment required to do that, but it's well worth it. Right? So it's a very, very high value channel to be working in. but it does require some effort, and it requires attention.
Absolutely. And then as you've been going through all of these different companies and having started out as a startup yourself, and then going through all these different places that you've been, I'm sure you've been able to connect with your U.S. counterparts and meet them and everything. What are some of the differences that you see between the U.S. tech scene and the Canadian tech scene, or the Toronto tech scene in particular? And the reason I ask that is because Rory and I were speaking before we came out. For me, running Startup Grind is an opportunity to get everybody to meet each other, network with each other, but to really see who else is out there. I mean, it is a grind. Every day we're here. Every day we're not sleeping, and we're putting in the hours, and we're going and we're going and we're going, and then you have those days where you just question why, do I go on? And yeah, you're laughing. It's true, right? We've all been there. And that's really what we're trying to create here with Startup Grind. And I think it's really important sometimes for as Canadians, we kind of look down at ourselves, or always be looking over the fence at what's the greatest thing over there. But we're great. We have a great talent pool in Toronto. We have a lot of energy. We have a lot of ideas. And that's something that we're always trying to build here. And that's why I'm asking you, because you've kind of seen both sides of the fence. What are some of the differences that you've seen?
Sure. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this one. I'm a very proud and vocal Canuck, particularly when I go south. The first answer is actually a lack of difference. So I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, I spent a lot of time in New York, I spent a lot of time in Toronto and Waterloo, and I'll be the first to tell you that there is very little decipherable difference between the talent levels in this market versus anywhere else. Canada holds its own exceptionally well, and I think particularly this region. Any big company you want to look at that would be tech related. In my case, it's Microsoft, Google, and Twitter. Those are the big three that I've worked for over the course of the last little while. The first thing I'll tell you is all three of those companies have a very healthy, over-indexed representation of Canadians in very high places, right? So we have put some extremely powerful people in some wonderful offices to be very favorable to the Canadian market as it relates to these companies. So that's one obvious indicator. Are we talented? Yeah. Can we hang with the US folks? Yes, we can, and we do on a regular basis. Second is, I think there's a lot of other data-driven indicators, right? It was Steve Woods from Google in Waterloo who was in the press, I guess it was 3 weeks ago, saying that Google has hired more people from the University of Waterloo than anywhere else for the engineering program. And that statement, just on its own, is a huge one, right? So we have a ripe talent pool of exceptionally intelligent engineers, and developers.
Right next door.
Yeah, and they're right there.
Yeah.
So Steve's trying to grab as many of them as he can. We'll be in the mix really soon. But they're shipping them off to everywhere in the world, right? And this is exceptionally good for the Canadian ecosystem because I think a lot of that talent actually goes and then comes back. Really is a boomerang effect, and as it comes back, it's coming back with a global perspective that I think is really important for the Canadian market. I think also the tech contributions themselves, the quality of the product, the nature of the startups that we're seeing both in Toronto and I think actually all over southwestern Ontario, really. I think Toronto and Kitchener-Waterloo get a lot of credit, but there's a lot of other clusters out there that are doing really well too, including.
Yes, they're from London.
Yes, London.
Hey, London!
Ivy.
Yeah, exactly. And my parents live in London, so I'm going to get some extra points for that. I know my mom is watching the Periscope. So London's big. But yeah, there's an acknowledgement in the Valley through organizations like C100, for example, that I think are also doing exemplary work. We've got a good ambassador network in the right places, both in the companies that are doing the acquiring or buying services or products, out of all the smaller companies in the ecosystem, where it's understood that Canada's got an exceptionally high level of talent. The products that are rolling out of here are particularly well regarded, and then we've got a pretty bright future. I mean, we just had Mayor Rory down in the Valley talking about the corridor. I think we've got the right kind of momentum behind building a stronger presence for the Canadian market. What I also can tell you is whenever any of our US friends come up here, they're jealous. Particularly now, I think as Trump continues to kind of rise, and we got more and more questions about who can come up and work out of the Toronto office for Twitter, and we got lots of spots, so it should be interesting.
Now we're going to get a bunch of American movement in. I don't know. Do we want this? Do we not want this? I don't know. That's for another day. So we started off our chat talking about how you, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Usually what happens is we have people who are in the corporate space and they say, you know what, that's it, shackles, whatever, blah, 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 I'm leaving, I can't do this anymore, here's my dream, I'm gonna follow it, it's my startup, and then you realize it's hell and it's hard and all that wonderful stuff. But you've done things backwards. I'm really interested to know how starting off in a startup has helped you personally in your career.
It's a great question. I talk about it a lot. It's been extremely important for me. The story that I tell on this one is that I started actually, I didn't go directly into the startup world. I was in strategy consulting, so I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up after I left school. It was a hedge. I got to keep doing everything that I kind of liked. But when I got out of that, I went to work for Bell, big corporate, and then these buddies of mine, Shane, called me. What I learned as a startup entrepreneur was what scrappiness really means, what it means to be resourceful, but probably more than anything in my own case, it was how to sell, like really how to sell, like with no backup. Like you have a product, you have somebody that you need to sell it to, and that's all you have, right? And you either sell or you starve, right? If you want to keep the lights on next month, you've got to make the next IO happen, or you've got to make the next deal go through, or you've got to build the next product, or whatever those things are. There are very few people in the world who genuinely understand what that's like. And I think it's that experience that makes you better. You don't really have an option, right? You blow it on the first pitch, you've got to get it on the second pitch. And if you blow it on the second pitch, you've got to get it on the third pitch. And every time, it's better. Managing operating cash flow, all the nitty-gritty on actually how to really run a business. Did you pay too much for rent? Did you really need that other computer? You know, all those questions were the ones that I've really brought with me, right? So that doesn't change. The scope of the business gets larger, but it becomes equally as important always to make sure that resources are employed in the best way and that every pitch is your best one. So I don't think a lot of people learn these lessons outside of a more entrepreneurial environment where you either sink or swim, right? So that's really important. I think the other sort of key lessons for me that have really stuck with me is the nature of a really solid relationship and how important that is, right? So in the early days of this company that we started, there were a few clients who really believed in us and fueled our business in exchange for value, right? And really understanding how that works. When you have 3 clients, it's really easy. Like, these people aren't happy, I don't pay rent next month, it's that simple. But when you have several thousand or several 100,000 clients, those principles are still really important. And it's really easy to lose focus on those things as the large enterprise sort of unfolds. You can sit behind a screen and treat it as a dashboard, or you can realize that every single one of those 100,000 customers is a business that needs to sell its next thing, and you've got to behold to these businesses, and you've got to have that value exchange.
Yeah.
So I learned that in a very, very intimate way in a very small environment, and I've carried a lot of those lessons with me since.
So what advice would you give to the group here? We're all trying to sell every day, right? We always have our smiley face on and our energy, and we're always, yay, let's go. But what are some of the tips that you can provide? I mean, I'm sure we can all use it, right?
A few, I guess. I mean, one you're already doing. One of the things that I always found particularly inspiring, especially in Toronto, is the community itself, right? Like, there's a lot of strength in this room, especially on the bad days, right? So when you do have those days where you want to just, throw your computer out the window and call it a day, there's, probably 24 other people in this room who had that day today, right? You can be here for each other, moral support and all that kind of stuff. It was huge for me. Those were, as you know, those are very, very trying times. Especially when your back's against the wall, right? When you're down to the last couple $100, like literally. That's where the power of a good community becomes very obvious when there's that. It's not financial support, it's not intellectual support, it's emotional, sort of personal support that was really important. I think this kind of environment is exactly what I would have liked to have scaled out more in the early days. I guess the other piece of advice that I would offer is just stick with it. It's easy to say that, I don't know about how trite that sounds, but you did this because you had a really good idea and you're passionate about it. And you can, at least in my experience, there's almost always a way. Right, the light comes on eventually. It gets dark in that tunnel for a while, and then something happens. And it's easy to quit. Well, it's not always easy to quit, but it's the easiest option at the time. But often persistence is worth gold. And it's, again, just my own lessons, but keep moving forward. So.
True, it's good advice. And finally, just when somebody's reaching out to somebody trying to make a sales deal, I mean, you're the sales guy. You've done this forever, and with Google and everything else. What are some of the leave us with about building those relationships with those potential customers, with trying to get that third meeting. Maybe you're not going to get that third meeting if that second one doesn't go so well. So what are some of the insights you can share on that?
Sure. The first, these are just sort of personal tenets, and the guys here who joined me from Twitter heard this not too long ago. First rule for me is business is about people before it's about anything else. Right? So it doesn't really matter what the product is, or what it obviously does. But the first and most important thing is who you're dealing with. That when you're going for that piece of business, that there's someone who woke up this morning and put their pants on one leg at a time and brushed their teeth. And these are people, right? And you need to understand who they are and how they operate. There's a ton of science behind this, but I think 85% of the purchase process is about likability. Do they want to support your business? Do they want to support you? And that requires a lot of investment in time. And also just this emotional connection. And not a fake, I'm doing this for the purpose of getting to know you so that I can sell you something, but like real, genuine, who are you? What are your issues? How do I help you? That kind of stuff. That to me is the first and most important thing. And I think the second is, on the back of a relationship like that, always looking at a fair exchange of value. Right? So if I'm successful by the end of my career in tech or anywhere else, what I really want to be able to accomplish is this notion that I never did a bad deal. Right? That the deals that we did were always mutual and there was value on both sides. And I think if you live by that tenet, you can't really go wrong. If you've got a product that works and there's an actual value exchange, don't get greedy, don't pull the fast one, be a real partner, take a longer view, and I think that's the formula for success in general when dealing with people.
Yeah, it's really good. Really good advice. I know you've only been at Twitter for 9 weeks. I always end everything by saying, hey, what's next for you? I don't even know if you can answer this question. I mean, maybe it's a personal thing. Maybe you need a vacation. Maybe that's what's next. But what's coming up? What's coming up next with Rory?
Sure. Listen, I'm super happy doing what I'm doing. I'm not looking at sort of my next career move just yet. What I can say is what I'm excited about is how much growth is in front of me. Right? So this idea of business being about people first. I look out we now have 40. We've brought 3 more people in since I started. But the ability to work with a team like this for a cause like this and a mission like this is really, really neat. We've got a lot of support from partners and advertisers and users and all kinds of different places, and I'm just really excited about making that happen. It's going to be a longer build, and that's fine. I'm happy. I guess the thing that I'm the most excited about, just to share sort of maybe a more personal comment, is I'm able to do this from Canada. I never had to leave.
Yeah.
Right? There's a massive gravitational pull to go to the Valley or go to New York or whatever. And if all this plays out right, barring any catastrophe from a personal sort of professional perspective, I'm going to have been able to work for some of the most interesting companies. Right now I'm working for what I think is maybe the most interesting company on the market. And I did it from Toronto. And that's extremely exciting and very fulfilling for me personally.
That's really cool. Thanks again for coming out. Really appreciate it. Can we give them a round of applause?